me tell you something, my friend. Hope is a dangerous thing. Hope can drive a man insane. What's up, guys? I hope all of you are well out there. Welcome to a book review on Stephen King's very first published collection of 4 novellas, Different Seasons. Early in Stephen King's career, he had some success with novels such as Carrie, Salem's Lot, and The Shining, and his publishers warned him that he was at risk for becoming a genre writer, that he would become known as a horror novelist, and that this could damage his career in the long run. They couldn't have been more wrong. King hit it big as a horror novelist. However, he heeded their advice, and he wrote several novellas over the years in between writing horror novels that were primarily based not in the supernatural, but were more dramas and non-horror stories. He decided to publish them as what became very common for him, a collection of 4 novellas. King has a bunch of 4 novella collections, and each story in here represents a different season, hence the title Different Seasons, and it's also titled Different Seasons because it's something different than King had published up until that time. The first story in this collection, Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption, is a very beautiful drama. It's unlike anything King had written or published previous to it, and it's about a man named Andy Dufresne. Andy Dufresne is convicted of murder, and we don't know as the reader if Andy is guilty or not, but this story is told by our narrator, a man named Red, who is also locked up basically for life, and he tells us the story about how his friend, Andy Dufresne, escapes from Shawshank prison. Now, this is a no-holds-barred wonderful story. It's one of King's best. You know, many people have said that they've detected a difference between Stephen King's writing before his accident in 1999, old Stephen King, and after his accident in 99. New Stephen King. King was hit by a minivan and it nearly killed him. It was really serious. He was going to stop writing. He barely survived it. And people have said they've detected a difference before and after. And this story is basically old Stephen King defined. If you know what I'm talking about with old King, you will hear his voice coming from the pages of this. It's a story about love. It's a story about perseverance. And it's no wonder they made a great movie from this one. It's been many years since I've seen the movie, but this is one of the best things that I've ever written or that I've ever read by Stephen King. I wish I could write a story this good. I haven't seen the movie in many years, but now that I finally read the novella, I'm looking forward to going back and watching the movie, which is largely regarded as one of the greatest movies of all time. I cannot help but to give this a 10 out of 10 perfect rating. Now, the second story in the collection, Apt Pupil, is about a teenage boy named Todd Bowden who realizes that his neighbor, an old man named Kurt Dusander, is a former Nazi prison guard. A big-time killer is Kurt Dusander, and Kurt has escaped prosecution to the United States. He's changed his identity, and Todd catches on to his secret. And this is an unusual story about a kid who's troubled, who basically blackmails Kurt Dusander. You see, Todd Bowden wants to know about the death camp. He's fascinated by violence, and he blackmails Kurt into telling him stories and trying to dominate Kurt Dusander. You see, Todd Bowden gets off on the fact that he's dominating a person that dominated so many innocent people during World War II in the fictional Nazi concentration camp of Patton. Now, I saw the movie Apt Pupil years ago, and I was not really excited about going into the novella. I didn't really care much for the movie, and as I was reading it, before I got halfway through, I realized that the novella and the movie are very different stories indeed. I don't know what they were thinking with that movie. They watered it down. It's a much darker novella than it is a movie. Todd Bowden is just a psychopath, and Kurt Dusander is a psychopath, and it's a very interesting story reading about their personalities clashing. And I don't want to spoil anything here, but this was a crazy story. Tons of action in it. It was just almost unbelievable after seeing the movie. I thought that this was really good. Themes of life and death in this one, and history. I've read many books on World War II and the camps there, Auschwitz, and many others. I read a book earlier this year, KL, A History of the Nazi Concentration Camps, and I think that King does a good job with his research here. I felt that he was invested in this story. It is really just an amazing, off-the-wall story. It's a very violent story, I'll warn you. But if you've seen the movie, I highly recommend reading the novella. I give it a 9 out of 10 stars rating. Number 3 in the collection is a story called The Body, which is a very beloved story among constant readers. People just love this one, so I was excited about finally getting around to see what all the fuss was about with this one. It's a story about some teenage boys. Gordon is our narrator here, and these young boys come to find out that there's a dead body. Another young boy has died in the woods, not too far from where they live, some miles away. And they decide to go on a journey. They come together, they go on this journey in the woods to try to find this other boy's corpse. And it's a coming-of-age story. This is really all about the characters. I think the story or the plot is just to serve the character development here. I associated the characters with the Losers Club in Stephen King's It. I actually think that the characters here in The Body are the third best set of Stephen King characters that I have ever read, behind the Dark Tower characters and behind the Losers Club. The characters here really reminded me of the Losers Club. It was fun to read about these young boys that are friends, and they're talking about their lives and their futures. They're philosophizing, basically, as they're going on this journey to look for a corpse. And I thought it was really good. I also liked the antagonists in this one. You see, there are a group of older boys that actually discover the body first. And Ace Merrill is one of the boys. And there's some confliction between the young boys and the older boys that I think works really well here. It serves the plot beautifully. I always like it when there's a recurring Stephen King character. I read about Ace Merrill in Needful Things. I think he might have came up in The Dark Half. And here he is again, up close and personal in The Body. And I thought the whole character set was just great. Stephen King uses the characters here to philosophize about life and youth and what it is to become an adult, what it is to live in childhood and have to come out of that to live on as an adolescent. And it was just beautiful writing. You know, Stephen King is a really smart guy. And that fact is one of the reasons that his career has been so successful. He knows people, and he really writes about them well in a way that I can relate to. You know, that's one of the great things about King, is he really is a psychologist and a philosopher. And this story, it might sound a little silly, but it reminds me of the old dialogues by like Plato, where there are characters that are talking back and forth, trying to relate some philosophical idea to the reader. And I kind of get a sense that that's what King was doing with this one. It's all about life and death, and I thought it was a really, really good tale. You know, I'm just impressed with this Different Seasons collection. I give this one a 9 out of 10 stars rating. And finally, the story I've been waiting to talk about, number 4 in the collection, last but not least, The Breathing Method. This is a very enchanting story. It's about a man named David, who is invited to a gentleman's club by his boss. And the gentleman's club is a place where men meet, they talk with one another, they tell stories with one another, they drink, they smoke. It's kind of a getaway in the city. And I'm not going to spoil anything here, but I thought that this was a ghost story. I thought that David was going to a club filled with ghosts. You see, one of the really intriguing things about this story is that it's hard to figure out exactly what's going on. One night, while David attends the gentleman's club, a former physician, a retired doctor, tells a story about the breathing method, which is simply a method of breathing that he created to help pregnant women give birth. It's a kind of breathing to relax a woman, to help her with her pains. And in the story, a woman named Sandra who is without a husband. She becomes pregnant. She wants to have a baby. And this story is all about the relationship between the woman, Sandra, the pregnant woman, and her physician, who later tells the story about her in the Gentleman's Club. Now, this may not seem like much, right? Okay, a Gentleman's Club, a story about a woman who uses a method of breathing while she's trying to have a baby. It might not seem like much, and I can't exactly put my finger on what I loved so much about this story. You see, this is the shortest story. It's at the back of the collection. I figured it would be the least interesting one, just stuck back there as filler. And I was wrong. I loved this story. This story made me feel a certain way when I read it. I empathized with Sandra and the fact that she wants to have a baby. She has no husband. She's frowned on by society. I think her story takes place in the 1930s, where it was really looked down upon for a woman to be pregnant without a husband. So I empathized with her, and the whole thing was just very interesting to me. And at the end, some very enchanting things happen in this story, and it's kind of left open for you to decide what you think is really going on, and I won't say any more. But I give this story a 9 out of 10 stars rating. It's so bizarre, and I can't exactly tell you why I loved it so much, but I strongly recommend, if you own this story, if you have access to it, just read it. Just read it. Even if you don't want to go and commit to the whole different seasons collection all at once, just read The Breathing Method. It's a short novella. It's really just a short story. It's not a huge commitment, but I love it. My final ruminations are that this is a great piece of artwork. If this book were to come alive and have a mind of its own, it would be old Stephen King personified. Please put a like on this video if you enjoyed it, and let me know in the comments below, if you've read this one, which story is your favorite. May you all have long days and pleasant nights, my friends.